Inside Florida's death row, life in isolation at Florida State Prison. Like, subscribe and drop a comment right now, because what you're about to hear isn't just another prison story. It's a descent into isolation, power, and secrets that don't stay buried. And once you step inside Florida's death row, there's no easy way out. The call came in just after midnight, slicing through the humid stillness of North Florida. Sirens traced red lines through the darkness as patrol cars converged on a rural stretch of highway outside Stark. A prison transport van had pulled over unexpectedly, hazard lights blinking like a distress signal. Inside, officers found something that wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not tonight. A sealed evidence bag sat on the floor between the rows, unlogged and unaccounted for. No one could explain how it got there. And stamped on the tag, in block letters that stopped the room cold, was a name that belonged on death row. Florida State Prison rises from the flatland like a concrete verdict. Razor wire crowns its walls. Guard towers stand like sentinels. And the air carries a quiet that feels enforced. This is where the state sends a condemned, men whose names have passed through courtrooms and headlines before settling into a smaller, colder existence. Inside, time doesn't move forward, it circles. Death row is a place built on routines, so strict they become rituals. Doors open and close on a schedule measured to the minute. Meals slide through slots. Voices echo and then disappear. The cells are small, reinforced, and designed to reduce everything: movement, contact, hope. The isolation is the point. And yet, even here, information travels, whispered through vents, tapped through pipes, passing glances during brief, supervised moments outside the cell. The name on the bag belonged to Marcus Hale. Convicted years earlier for a crime that had shocked the state, Hale had been transferred through multiple facilities before landing here. He was known for keeping to himself, for filing motions in a steady, meticulous hand, for never raising his voice. To guards, he was low risk. To investigators, he was finished business, until the bag appeared. Detective Laura Mendez arrived before dawn. She had the posture of someone who didn't waste steps and the eyes of someone who noticed everything. She'd worked cold cases, corruption cases, cases where the truth hid behind procedure. Florida State Prison was different. It was sealed, controlled, and suspicious by design. She knew the rules before she crossed the threshold. No assumptions, no shortcuts, no sympathy. The evidence bag contained documents, copies of court filings, disciplinary reports, and a handwritten note folded with care. The note didn't confess to anything. It asked a question. If the record is wrong, who benefits from keeping it that way? There was a date at the bottom. Tomorrow, Mendez requested Hale's file and a supervised interview. The request moved slowly, snagged by approvals and protocols. When she finally sat across from him in the interview room, a thick pane of glass between them, Hale looked thinner than his photos. Older, but his eyes were sharp, focused, almost relieved. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said calmly. His voice carried through a speaker that hummed between words. Mendez didn't react. "You sent it out," she said. "You wanted it found." Hale nodded once. "I wanted it noticed." He didn't deny his conviction. He didn't argue the verdict. Instead, he talked about the months before his arrest, about a witness who changed their story, about a piece of evidence logged late. Small things, procedural things, the kind of details that don't make headlines but decide outcomes. Mendez pressed him. "Why now?" Hale's mouth tightened. "Because someone else is in danger." Outside the room, a correctional officer shifted his weight, eyes flicking between the clock and the corridor. Inside, Hale leaned closer to the glass. "There's a schedule," he said. "Transfers, hearings, evaluations. I've been watching it for years. When the schedule breaks, it's not an accident." The prison denied any irregularities. Administrators cited security concerns and refused access to internal logs. The transport unit reported nothing missing, nothing added. The evidence bag, they said, must have been a clerical error. Mendez had heard that word before. It was the sound of a door closing. Then a guard went missing. Officer Daniel Price had worked death row for 8 years. Reliable, quiet, the kind of man who followed the book because the book kept people alive. He failed to clock out at the end of his shift. His car was found in the employee lot, keys still inside. No signs of a struggle. No note, just absence. The prison locked down. Cell sealed. Movement halted. Rumors surged through the vents. Mendez requested camera footage and was told it was under review. She requested Price's personnel file and received a redacted summary. The schedule Hale mentioned came back to her, ticking in her mind like a countdown. That night, she returned to the evidence bag. Tucked behind the documents was something she'd missed, a slim envelope addressed to no one. Inside was a photocopy of a floor plan, not of the prison, but of an old courthouse annex slated for demolition years ago. A location circled in red, and beneath it, a single line: "They don't disappear you here. They move you." Mendez stood alone in the evidence room, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. Florida State Prison wasn't just a place of endings, she realized. It was a crossroads. Information entered, information left, and someone was using the isolation to hide the traffic. When they opened the sealed maintenance corridor marked on the photocopy, long abandoned, officially inaccessible, what they found rewrote the case before it had even begun. The maintenance corridor smelled like dust and old concrete, the kind of place forgotten on purpose. When the steel door finally gave way, its hinges screamed loud enough to echo through the prison's bones. Inside, flashlight beams cut through darkness that hadn't been disturbed in years. What they found wasn't a body or blood or anything immediately criminal. It was worse. It was proof of planning. Filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers warped with age but carefully labeled. Dates, names, transfer codes. Each folder contained copies of records that should have existed only in secure digital systems. Inmate movements, guard schedules, vehicle logs. Someone had been quietly archiving the prison's secrets offline, beyond audits, beyond oversight. Detective Laura Mendez felt the shift instantly. This wasn't about one inmate trying to save himself. This was infrastructure, a shadow system running parallel to Florida's most secure prison. By sunrise, the Department of Corrections had arrived in force. Administrators sealed the corridor and attempted to take control of the evidence. Mendez pushed back, citing jurisdiction and the missing officer. Tension filled the air as authority collided with accountability. Every delay felt deliberate. Officer Daniel Price was still missing. Mendez returned to Marcus Hale. This time, he didn't wait for questions. "They'll say you misunderstood what you saw," Hale said calmly. "They'll say those files were leftovers from an old investigation. They'll say anything except the truth." "And the truth is?" Mendez asked. Hale exhaled slowly. "Death row isn't just about punishment. It's about leverage." He explained it piece by piece. Certain inmates, especially those with legal knowledge or sensitive information, became assets. Their isolation made them invisible. Their reputations made them disposable. Over time, unofficial deals formed, information exchanged, favors traded, transfers manipulated, not to free inmates, but to silence them somewhere quieter. "Florida State Prison is a filter," Hale said. "If someone knows too much, they don't stay here long. They vanish into the system." Mendez thought of the transport van, the unlogged evidence bag, the broken schedule. "What about Officer Price?" she asked. Hale hesitated. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Price wasn't part of it, he said, but he noticed it. Surveillance footage finally arrived late that afternoon, hours late. Mendez watched as Price completed his rounds, pausing once near a restricted door. He checked his watch, frowned, then continued. Minutes later, the camera glitched. When it came back online, Price was gone. No struggle. No alarms. Someone with access had turned the system off. Pressure mounted fast. Media vans gathered outside the prison gates, helicopters circling like vultures. Officials released a statement calling Price's disappearance an ongoing personnel matter. Mendez knew the wording was intentional. It bought time. Time for files to disappear. Time for stories to align. Inside death row, tension thickened. Inmates sensed change the way animals sense weather. Guards grew quieter. Movement slowed. The routine fractured. Then the first file went missing. One of the cabinets from the corridor was suddenly empty. The label read, "Hail Marcus, pre-transfer review." Mendez demanded answers. Administrators claimed they had never seen the folder. She knew better. Someone was cleaning up, and Hale was now a liability. That night, Mendez received a message on a secure line she hadn't shared with anyone at the prison. A single sentence. "If you want Price alive, stop asking the wrong questions." Attached was a photo. Blurry, dim, but unmistakable. Officer Daniel Price, seated, wrists bound, alive. The metadata pointed to a location miles away from the prison, an industrial zone near the coast. Mendez didn't sleep. She mapped connections, cross-referenced names, traced transfers that didn't add up. A pattern emerged. Inmates sent to out-of-state facilities. Guards reassigned abruptly. Internal investigators rotated before finishing audits. Every road led back to Florida State Prison, then vanished beyond it. By morning, Marcus Hale was scheduled for an emergency transfer. The paperwork cited security concerns. No destination listed. Mendez sprinted through channels, filed injunctions, called favors she hadn't used in years. By the time she reached death row, it was too late. Hale's cell was empty. The bed stripped. The slot sealed. A guard met her eyes and shook his head, slightly, not defiant, apologetic. "They moved him," he said quietly. "Orders from above." Mendez felt the clock accelerate. Hale was the key. Price was leverage. And whoever controlled the transfers controlled the narrative. As she turned to leave, an inmate's voice drifted from behind a steel door, low and steady. "Detective," the voice said, "you're running out of time." She stopped. Another voice joined it, from a different cell. Then another, a chorus of witnesses, locked away, unheard, until now. And for the first time since the case began, Laura Mendez realized the truth wasn't hidden in isolation. It was surrounded by it. The voices didn't stop when Laura Mendez walked away. They followed her down the corridor, carried through vents and concrete, fragments of names and dates in places that refused to stay buried. She recorded everything she could, times, cell numbers, phrases repeated by different men who had never met but told the same story. Transfers that didn't make sense. Reviews that happened overnight. People who existed in paperwork one day and vanished the next. By the time she reached her car, she knew two things with certainty. Officer Daniel Price was still alive, and Marcus Hale had never been the end of this. He had been the warning. Mendez ignored protocol and drove straight to the industrial zone near the coast where the photo of Price had been taken. The warehouses that were half abandoned, relics of businesses that had moved on. She followed the metadata trail until it dead-ended at a rusted gate. No guards, no cameras, just silence. Inside, she found signs of recent use. Coffee cups, footprints, a chair bolted to the floor. Price wasn't there, but a laptop was. The files on it were meticulous, mirrors of the cabinets from the maintenance corridor, digitized and updated. Inmate profiles flagged with symbols only insiders would understand. Guard rotations highlighted in red. Payment records routed through shell companies. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was a network built slowly, protected by bureaucracy and fear. The final folder made her breath catch. Witness Protection Liaison Internal. It detailed a covert program that never existed on paper. Certain inmates, deemed too dangerous or too inconvenient to release, were quietly rerouted, officially transferred, unofficially erased. Their knowledge leveraged, their silence guaranteed by isolation and distance. Florida State Prison was the intake valve, the place where decisions were made. And Daniel Price had found it. Mendez called it in. This time, she didn't go through the Department of Corrections. She went federal. Within hours, the prison was surrounded, not by media, but by agents with warrants. Offices were sealed, servers cloned, administrators escorted out under watchful eyes. The system resisted, then buckled. Too many receipts, too many witnesses. Price was found at dawn in a safe house miles away, shaken but alive. He'd been moved twice, kept compliant with promises and threats, told it would all end if he stayed quiet. He didn't. Not anymore. As the arrests rolled in, a name surfaced again and again, not Hales, but someone higher. Someone who signed off without appearing to. Someone who understood that isolation wasn't just punishment. It was camouflage. Marcus Hale's trail ended in a facility that didn't exist on public maps. But Mendez had prepared for that. The voices on death row had given her the missing piece, a transfer code reused only once, years earlier, tied to a courthouse annex long since demolished. They found Hale alive, older, thinner, but smiling. "I told you," he said softly, as agents led him into the light. "They move you, unless someone stops them." The case shattered quietly. No single press conference. No dramatic confessions on camera. Just indictments, resignations, sealed settlements. The system corrected itself the way it always did, slowly, reluctantly, and without apology. Florida State Prison returned to routine. Doors opened and closed. Meals slid through slots. The isolation remained, but something had changed. In the months that followed, inmates filed motions citing the case. Guards reported anomalies without fear. Audits stuck. And in the quiet hours, when the prison settled into enforced silence, the vents carried a different sound. Not whispers. Records. They thought the truth could be buried behind concrete and procedure. They thought isolation would erase it. They were wrong. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Stay close.